Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here at a process that is now coming to another step in moving forward in growing the economy, creating jobs, and making certain that the United States of America can compete in a global economy. Months ago, last year, I got concerned, as my colleagues here did, and many of them have demonstrated this in very serious ways, about our national deficit. The deficit's what brought me to this issue of entrepreneurship, with the recognition that we had not done much of anything as a Congress or an administration to solve our country's fiscal challenges. And so a way that we can address our national debt is to have a growing economy in which people are working and paying taxes. At about that time that I was looking for something to latch onto to promote job creation, the Kauffman Foundation, headquartered in Kansas City, the Kauffman Foundation on Entrepreneurship, issued their report demonstrating the value of entrepreneurship historically in this country, and particularly in the last few decades, on job creation. And they had specific policy recommendations that would enhance the chances, increase the chances that someone who had an idea could go to their barn, their garage, their backyard, and begin the process of trying to take that idea to market and have a better chance of succeeding. My initial, in seeking someone to be an ally in this regard, Senator Warner was kind enough to accept the only invitation that I offered. And Mark is an entrepreneur himself and has the reputation and the experience of working together with Republican and Democrat members of the United States Senate. So we pitched an idea to Senator Warner that we introduce something called the Startup Act. I think the four senators who are here operate under the belief, in fact, most of us are relatively new to the Senate. We did not ever fall into the belief that you can't do anything if there's an election year. And so Mark and I introduced that legislation. We then concluded that Senator Coons and Senator Rubio had introduced legislation that had great merit called the AGREE Act. And we went to them, and we've had a number of conversations over a long period of time, and today is the result of those conversations in which the four of us, two Republicans, two Democrats, come together to introduce the Startup 2.0 Act. And we are delighted that the four of us have come together to push something that we believe can occur in this year called 2012. And we were pleased, all of us were involved in the Jobs Act that did become law, signed by the President. And we believe this is the next step in job creation in the United States. There's 5 components of this legislation. I'll let my colleagues describe those as they would like. But in our view, it is something that is significantly important for the ability for Americans to put food on their family's table, feel secure in their jobs, and save for their kids' education, save for their own retirement. The consequences of this legislation has immediate impacts upon everyday Americans who are very interested in making certain that they have a job and can care for their families. So we're of the opinion that now is the time, not the lame duck session. Now is the time, not 2013. But now we need to follow up with what we saw with the success of the Jobs Act, dealing with additional issues that will help in regard to innovation and entrepreneurship. We have with us today Steve Case from the President's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness. And we also have representatives from the Kauffman Foundation who have expertise in regard to the actual consequences of entrepreneurship in this country. Let me thank my colleagues, and let me thank those two individuals for working so closely with us to reach a piece of legislation that we are very pleased with and believe can have success. And let me now turn the opportunity to speak to my colleague, Mark Warner.
Thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jerry. And Jerry and I have become great friends, as well as Marco and Chris. We kind of all comment on the fact, as new guys, we didn't get the memo you're supposed to take election years off. Clearly, China's not taking this year off, Brazil's not taking this year off, India's not taking this year off, America can't. And for those of us like Steve and I who were entrepreneurs in the technology field for years, you know, when the Kauffman Foundation came out with their data that showed literally 80% of all the new jobs that have been created in the last 20 years in America came from startups. We've got to do more to help that entrepreneurial spirit startups take place. So the first step was, how do you get access to capital? And Steve Case was a yeoman worker behind that. How do you make it easier to go public? How do you make sure, with appropriate investor protections, how do you make sure you use the new power of the internet to democratize raising capital over the internet? The Jobs Act took a step that way. There's a variety of portions of Startup 2.0, but the part I want to talk about is, paired with access to capital is access to talent. We are in a global competition for talent. And if we had the same immigration policies back in the 90s and the 80s that we have today, I'm not sure we would have seen the tremendous innovation explosion that took place in America in the 1990s. So what we do is not the comprehensive immigration reform that we need, or the DREAM Act that I fully support, but we at least take some of the areas where I think there is common agreement that says, for those graduate degrees in the STEM fields, that PhD in engineering, if you are a foreign-born individual who's got that training, these are positions that there are not enough native-born Americans filling. And consequently, firms are taking those jobs abroad because there's not enough American-born talent. We're saying you can have a chance to get that, in effect, H-1B green card stapled to that STEM graduate degree, so that we can create those jobs here in America. And the ancillary jobs, if you've got a scientist, you've got the lab technicians and others, ancillary jobs that will be created on that. And coupled with that would be a new program, an entrepreneur's visa, so that if you choose to, at some point, if you've been here on an H-1B visa and choose to want to start that business here in America, if you can show you've raised the capital and are willing to hire American workers, we're going to give you that chance to start that company here as well. I can tell you, in my home state, Virginia, we've got a robust technology community. Literally a third of the tech firms in Northern Virginia are, at least one of the founders, are first-generation Americans. So if we're going to win the global competition for talent that Steve Case talks about, we've got to make sure that talent that we train here and those opportunities are presented to that will help those individuals, but also help create American jobs. So I think a dramatic step forward. There are other portions of the bill that my colleagues will talk about, but this, echoing what Jerry said, is this something similar to the Jobs Act that even in a presidential election year we ought to be able to get done. I'd now like to bring forward another new colleague, somebody who has made a great splash here in Washington, somebody who believes, as I and Chris and Jerry do, that the heart of the American dream is that opportunity to be an entrepreneur, to get a fair shot and get a fair chance. Great new senator from the state of Florida, Marco Rubio.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. And the single greatest thing that we can do, I think all of us would agree on this, that we can do for our country today is help it grow its economy. And the economy has always grown when someone decides to take what little money they have and use it to start a business or to grow an existing business. And increasingly, of course, the way you can get the fastest amount of growth is through companies that are starting out on their own. So there are things government can do to make it easier for them to do that. And that's what we've endeavored to do by working here today. We have taken ideas from people that have done this before, and we have taken ideas from people that want to do this in the future, and have incorporated them into this bill. A few months ago, Senator Coons and I worked on something called the AGREE Act, which we introduced when we called it the AGREE Act primarily because what we tried to do is go out and collect ideas that everybody could agree on, put them in one bill, and try to go get it passed. And obviously today we've teamed up with two other like-minded senators on their ideas as well. And hopefully what we're able to do here today is pass a series of measures on tax policy, on immigration policy, and one of the first steps towards modernizing our legal immigration system, to make it easier for people who want to start a business or to expand an existing business to be able to do that. That's what government can do. It can help people who want to do these things to do them. And the quicker the better, because our nation desperately needs rapid economic growth. The last point I would make about it is not found in the bill, but I think in the mood. And that is that as Americans look anxiously at our economic present, and more importantly, anxiously at our economic future, they also look at a broken political process, and what they hear is a lot of arguing and bickering. And I think that if we can come together and work on some things like this, the way the first jobs bill passed earlier this year, if we get something like this done, which is both meaningful and impactful, and do so in a bipartisan way. I think the good news that that creates might encourage some people to look towards investing in America's economy in the future as well. I don't want to overstate that, but I do want to point out that I think it's important for people to see that even in an election year, even with all the big issues that we disagree on, there are things we agree on, and that we are still able to do the things we agree on, and not simply hold them captive to election year politics. Does anyone need anything in Spanish?
Yes.
Thank you. Bueno, lo primero, muchas gracias por estar aquí en el día de hoy. Lo más importante que podemos hacer en este momento para nuestro país es crecer la economía. Y la economía crece cuando alguien empieza una nueva empresa o crece una empresa actual. Y el laborio, el trabajo, la responsabilidad del gobierno es de crear las condiciones para que personas puedan abrir nuevos negocios y nuevos comercios. Y por eso nos unimos aquí en el día de hoy, republicanos y demócratas, con varias ideas que nos han venido a nosotros directamente desde esas personas que están buscando crecer la economía, que están buscando crear nuevas fuentes de empleo. Estas son ideas bipartidistas y son importantes porque primero hacen cambios en el código tributario del país que aún va a poder ayudar a esas personas que están buscando abrir un nuevo negocio, un nuevo comercio. Segundo, empieza a modernizar el sistema de inmigración de este país para estar seguro que estamos atrayendo el talento, el mejor talento del mundo para ayudarnos con esa labor. Y tercero, manda un mensaje bipartidista muy positivo para el país. Enseña que en este país sí podemos trabajar juntos sobre las cosas en las cuales estamos de acuerdo. Hay muchos temas en los cuales no estamos de acuerdo y esos temas van a ser temas de campaña, pero hay temas en los cuales estamos de acuerdo y sobre esos temas todavía podemos trabajar. Muchas gracias. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was the last one. I am not. In fact, there's two more speakers, and the next is the gentleman, the senator who worked with me, or that I worked with him a few months ago on our AGREE Act, and it's been a real treat to bring it up to this point where we've now been able to team up our ideas with the ideas of two other senators. And I think he'll speak more about the details that were behind not just the AGREE Act, but the concepts behind coming together and working on the ideas of helping folks that are trying to start a business or expand an existing business. And it's been one of the real high points of my short time here is to be able to work with him on a couple of these key issues. And so it's my privilege to invite up Senator Coons. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rubio, and Senator Warner, and Senator Moran. I really have enjoyed working with Senator Rubio on the AGREE Act, and it really came out of a simple proposition. We were stuck here late one night as our body was sort of grinding along as the Senate was in session way beyond the time when each of us had hoped to go home to our respective young children in Delaware and Florida. And we got into a conversation where we challenged each other to look seriously at the elements of each party's, each chamber's jobs plans and see if we couldn't find some elements in common that we could agree on, that we could package into a bill, and that we could move forward. And that AGREE Act, which we introduced now many months ago, has actually had two of its provisions now enacted, one by executive order, one in the Jobs Act. And so, along with Senators Warner and Moran, we took a look at the Startup Act and decided to find areas where there were common provisions that all four of us could support. There's two I'll point to briefly, because the whole provision includes things on taxes and trade, immigration, innovation, intellectual property, that I think grow out of the very strong and very good work that Steve Case and the Jobs Council and the folks at the Kauffman Foundation have been doing. There are some tax provisions in this bill that I think deserve some attention and merit. One, making permanent the capital gains exemption for qualified small businesses, and the second, an innovation or a startup business tax credit that takes the existing research and development credit and sharpens it and focuses it so it's accessible to startup companies. There's a lot of provisions in this bill that deserve serious consideration. As we've already seen with the Jobs Act, it is possible, even in this sharply divided Washington, even in an election year, to pass things that we can all agree are in the best interest of our country and our economy. As our recovery continues, now in its 26th month of continuous private sector jobs growth, I think all of us agree we'd like to see that jobs growth be more robust. And we all agree that supporting America's entrepreneurs, helping them with access to markets, to capital, protecting their inventions and innovations, giving them access to world-class talent are things we can and should be doing. Last, in some ways, the most important thing we can do is to simply stand together, to show to the average American out there who is wondering, who is puzzled by the partisanship and the division that they see here in Washington, whether we can come together to do things that are in their interest. The four of us stand here to say, yes, we can, and to challenge our respective caucuses to take up these ideas, to move them forward, and to enact them into law. That is the only way we will not just sustain this recovery, but strengthen it in a world where we have vigorous global competitors. As Senator Warner said at the outset, Brazil and China, India and Russia, they're not taking this year off. We can't either. We need to work together. With that, I'm pleased to introduce Steve Case, a talented entrepreneur, a member of the President's Jobs Council, someone who has been a real leading voice for entrepreneurship and innovation. We are grateful for what he's added to this debate so far. Steve?
Thank you, Senator Coons, and thank you all four senators for coming together and making this a focus. There's really two messages, I think. One is, as you've heard, that bipartisanship is important. And even though it is an election year and people are kind of in their camps, it's time to focus on a few issues where there really can be bipartisan support and where there needs to be action. And the fact that 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats are coming together today to focus on the Startup Act 2.0, I think is extremely important. The second message is that this economy was built by risk-taking entrepreneurs. We're not the leading economy in the world by accident. It was the work of entrepreneurs, not just creating companies, but entire industries. That's been the history of America, the story of America over the last 200 years. It's important that we double down on our entrepreneurs. As you've heard from all these senators, we're not just seeing the globalization of manufacturing that a lot of people are talking about, but also now the globalization of entrepreneurship as capital and talent really flows much more fluidly and quickly all around the world. We still have the lead. We are still the world's most entrepreneurial nation, but we're going to lose that position if we don't take action and don't take action now. The Startup Act 2.0 does do that. It builds, as you've heard, on the work of the Jobs Act, which really came together with broad bipartisan support. Leadership from the President, his statement of support was critically important. Majority Leader Eric Cantor brought the House together. The Senate came together. That was passed and signed into law. And that was very important, and we celebrated that. But even when we were there with the President signing that about 6 weeks ago, we began the discussion about what do we do next to make sure it's not just focusing on capital, but also focusing on talent and regulation and commercialization, some of the things that are in this bill. So this builds on the Jobs Act and takes it to the next important step of really making sure we do have policies for this country that make sure entrepreneurship can continue to be we can be the most entrepreneurial economy. And as Senator Warner and several others said, it's particularly important to focus on this global battle of talent. It's crazy that we bring people here, give them these PhDs and master degrees, and then kick them out of the country, force them to go back to their countries, essentially start companies there that compete with our companies here. Nobody would think it makes sense if we had people from China coming to our naval academy, taught them our naval secrets, and kicked them back, forced them to go back to China to join the Chinese Navy. But that's essentially what we're doing with our immigration policy around engineers and entrepreneurs in particular. And as Senator Rubio said, immigration is a complicated, sensitive, emotional issue, and the whole issue of illegal immigration obviously needs attention. The DREAM Act obviously needs attention. But right now, I think we should focus particularly on this issue of high-skilled immigration, on entrepreneurs and engineers who are the job creators, who are creating the companies that can power our economy. Finally, for our final speaker is somebody I've known for 15 years, Bob Lighton. The Kauffman Foundation has been a great partner with us on the Startup America Partnership, really providing the analytics, the research, the intellectual rigor, if you will, that's really made it obvious to people here in Washington how important entrepreneurship is. So Bob, why don't you give us some of your information?
Thanks a lot, Steve, and I just want to express my gratitude to all 4 senators who are here inviting me to talk to you briefly. I also want to congratulate all 4 senators for coming together in this election year for doing something as important as what we're now witnessing. So I'll just give you a couple of takeaways. The Kauffman Foundation, many of you know, is